One way of evaluating the greatness of a painting, in my view, is by letting the image speak to you every time you look at it. If anything new or different is revealed, you can rest assured that the painting is alive and complete. This is undoubtedly the case of Diego Velázquez's large canvas known as Las Meninas, executed in 1656 in the old Caserón del Alcázar de los Asturias in Madrid. By the 19th century, Velázquez's enigmatic piece was acknowledged as a very important work that no serious scholar or artist could ignore. Pablo Picasso was no exception, and he revisited the painting 3 centuries later with the intention of producing his own version of the masterpiece. The outcome of his research was 58 canvases. The first and main canvas, which you can see on the screen, was completed and dated on the 17th of August 1957, and the last one was dated 30th of December that same year. So the whole series took roughly 4 months to complete. We know the precise dates because Picasso was in the habit of dating all his work. In this talk, we will mainly address Picasso's Meninas. I will refer to precise information provided by his friends Jaume Sabartés and Josep Palau i Fabra. This drawing portrays Sabartés, and it was drawn by Picasso soon after they met in Barcelona when they were both 17 years old. Sabartés was an artist as well as an intellectual, highly respected in the milieu of Picasso and his friends. Years later, Jaume became Pablo's private secretary, a post that he held until his death. Their friendship lasted 70 years. He donated his collection of the artist's work to the Barcelona City Council in order to create the Picasso Museum in Barcelona. The museum occupies 5 large palaces dating from the 13th to the 15th centuries. Josep Palau i Fabra was a Catalan poet and writer as well as a scholar. He had known Picasso for 2 decades, and he has written 25 monographs on the artist and his work. He died last year at the age of 91. Picasso gave him the title of official biographer, and it was with the help of Palau i Fabra that in May 1968 the complete Meninas series was transferred from France to Barcelona. The artist's gesture was in memory of his old and faithful friend Jaume Sabartés, who died that same year. Sabartés quotes Picasso, recalling a conversation with the artist dating from 1950. If one were to set about copying Las Meninas, and if that person were me, I would reach a point in which I would ask myself, what about moving this figure a little towards the right or towards the left? Then I would try to continue the painting in my own way, forgetting Velázquez. Having slightly moved the figure would force me to modify the light in the picture or to change it completely even. In this way, little by little, I would paint Meninas that would appear horrendous to the professional copyist. They would not be at all like the Meninas of Velázquez. They would be my Meninas. And indeed, during the summer of 1957, Picasso set about painting his very own Meninas in the villa he had bought a couple of years earlier in Cannes. La Californie was a large building with ample rooms and high ceilings. Situated on the French Riviera, the house was blessed by the Mediterranean sun as well as the most wonderful views of the peaceful sea. A very different space from the somber rooms of the Alcázar, where the original Meninas was born. To avoid visitors and distractions, he moved away from the ground floor, settling on the top story among his pigeons. He had built with his own hands a pigeon loft on the balcony of one of the larger rooms that he converted into a working studio. In his book titled The Secret of Picasso's Meninas, Josep Palau i Fabra mentions 5 elements to be taken into consideration before embarking on the study of Picasso's series. We will use these components as a chronology and structure for its reading. The first is a black and white photograph of Velázquez's painting bought by Sabartés on Picasso's instructions, which was pinned on the wall of the studio where the series was made. The second is the artist's first visit to the Prado in 1895, which coincided with the family's return to Malaga from Galicia. Pablo was then 13 years old. The third, as we will see, was connected with his visit to Rome in 1917, when the artist met his first wife, Olga Koklova. Clouzot's daring film, Le Mystère Picasso, dating from 1955, which portrays the artist at work, is the fourth. And last, but not least, there is the profound emotional crisis the painter was suffering at the time he painted Las Meninas, a state of mind that he exploited as he had done many times before to break new ground in his work. Pablo's first visit to Madrid's National Museum is particularly important because the boy was very unhappy. He was experiencing the painful side of love, as he was denied the acquaintance of a young girl called Ángeles Méndez Gil, daughter of a wealthy and powerful Galician family. There are letters exchanged between them where Ángeles complained to Pablo about the restrictions and reprimands she had to endure from her parents in their attempt to stop a relationship between the two adolescents. As if this wasn't enough, the family were mourning the recent death of Conchita, Picasso's child sister. The image on the screen is a drawing of Calabacilla, the dwarf that Velázquez had painted in his late 30s, which the young Picasso copied on his first visit to the Prado. Next to him, we see another transcription, this time of Ninio De Venegas, another dwarf painted by Velázquez 6 years after Calabacilla's portrait. Perhaps these two drawings suggest young Pablo's state of mind. He was not very tall himself, an issue that he acknowledged with annoyance on several occasions. We could assume that he felt some empathy with the fate of the royal dwarfs, on call 24 hours a day, dutifully pleasing the monarchs and their offspring, just as he was trying to please teachers and family with his drawings and paintings. What's more, among the servants and royals of Velázquez's painting, he may well have recognized his own place within the social hierarchy that denied him his affections for well-to-do Ángeles. This drawing here was made 2 years later, during 1897 and 1898, when Picasso moved to Madrid to study at the Academia de San Fernando, the most prestigious art school in the country. We know that Picasso's fascination for Velázquez was inherited from his father, who was also a painter. This early reverence for the old master must have had a lasting impact on the young painter that would bear fruit in later life. While in the Spanish capital, Picasso was able to wander around the galleries of the Great Museum and draw and sketch at leisure. He made a copy of the portrait of Philip IV, as we can see on the screen. Here he depicts María Agustina Sarmiento, the Infanta Margarita María de Austria, and the dog, taken from Las Meninas. The identity of the character with the hat is not known. The freehand style of these drawings reveals a desire to interpret rather than copy. Two ladies, a man and a dog. The cast could stand for Picasso's domestic arrangements throughout his life. Olga Koklova was a Russian ballerina, the daughter of an Ukrainian Tsarist military officer. She was in Rome dancing in the popular Ballet Russe, founded by Diaghilev, the successful theatre manager from Russia. Picasso was also in Italy at the time, designing the backdrops and costumes for Parade, one of the ballets of the Russian impresario. Pablo and Olga fell in love, and he followed her around the city while she was rehearsing her parts in the different ballets. One of them was called Meninas. This ballet was premiered in the Teatro Eugenia Victoria in San Sebastián, northern Spain, on the 21st of August 1916. But it was also presented in Rome in the Costanzi Theatre, known today as Teatro della Opera, on the 9th of April the following year. The set was designed by the Italian painter Carlos Socrate, and the costumes were inspired by Velázquez's painting and designed by the Catalan painter Josep Maria Sert. This fresco in the Cathedral of Vic, north of Barcelona, is a sample of the very Baroque work of the Catalan artist, very much in tune with Velázquez's characters. These two oils on wood, painted by Sert in 1916, portray some of the costumes he designed for the ballet. The music critic Edwin Evans, in his review, commented on their enormous weight and described them as huge hovering butterflies. The plot tells the story of a clandestine meeting between two court ladies and their lovers. A dwarf witnesses the encounter and blackmails them. Coclova's costume was salmon, pink and silver. She played the role of the Menina Isabelle de Velasco, daughter of the Count of Fuensalida and future dame in the Spanish court. Given Olga's aristocratic ambitions, this part most probably suited her admirably. The rehearsals prior to the performance in Italy must have taken place during March and beginning of April, when Picasso was in Rome working for The Ugly Lev along with Jean Cocteau and Leonid Massin. Meninas was a ballet designed for the Spanish public, and the painting of Velázquez was its main source. The music was the Pavane of Fauré. Palau y Fabra imagines Picasso watching Olga rehearse, dancing time and again to the Fauré tune, played by a rehearsal pianist. Picasso had found the Russian princess and the ballerina her Spanish knight in armor. The set was inspired by the interior of the Caserón del Alcázar, where the royals milled around dressed in heavy Baroque costumes, among whom Pablo and Olga celebrated their romance. Picasso would have listened and watched the pianist playing for the dancers, and therefore Palau's theory about the pianist being evocative of the ballet is worth considering, as canvas number 40 of the series portrays a character that does not belong to the Meninas. We know that Velázquez's work had already made a huge impact in Picasso when he was 13, and perhaps served as a screen behind which to hide his bereavement. Now, at the age of 36, this particular painting, again, had a personal significance as the setting from which he metaphorically took one of the Meninas and turned her into his wife. Henri-Georges Clouzot's film Le Mystère Picasso was recorded in the studios of La Victorine in Nice 2 years before the making of the Las Meninas series, and it is important because it introduced Picasso to offstage cinema, where he embraced the dynamism and language of filmmaking. The film director uses the camera to capture the way in which a picture is created, and in the process, the artist is able to take, live, the place of Velázquez looking at an audience. In the film, we see the marks appearing without the hand of the painter visible. Furthermore, as the paintings were made by soaking the absorbent white grounds with ink, the resulting images were reversed, just like the monarchs reflected in the mirror of Las Meninas. It could be argued that it was the principle of cinema what gave Picasso the reference to view the Baroque painting in the same way that the viewfinder of a camera would have done. The 43 studies that followed the main canvas, as we will see, are composed as if they were snapshots of the larger piece. The painter and the filmmaker were adding new dimensions to the medium of cinema. As Palau y Fabra points out, during the summer of 1957, Picasso experienced a profound emotional upheaval. The man was 76 years old. 4 years earlier, his long-term relationship with Françoise Gillot had ended, and although Picasso had already found a new companion in Jacqueline Roch, he had to endure the death of his friend Matisse in 1954, followed by the death of his wife Olga soon after. In his usual fashion, he changed homes with the same ease that he changed companions, and in La Californie he was perhaps ready to exorcise his sorrows by reconstructing Velázquez's studio on his own canvas, and in the process revisit his childhood love, his romance with a Russian ballerina in the Italian city, and all the other relationships that were now left behind. Let's now study the making of the main painting on show at present here in the National Gallery, together with number 4, and number 27 of the same series. Looking at the large black and white photograph of Velázquez's painting, we could believe that Picasso was certain from the beginning about the monochromatic choice of color for his large first canvas. What's more, if the painting was conceived as an arena where a new internal battle was to be fought, monochrome, used back in 1937 in his portrayal of the Guernica massacre, was an obvious start. In this drawing dated 16th of August, the composition is solved. The squares and circles could have been inspired in the spotlights and electric generators placed around him at the time of Clouzot's film. The sketch includes all the characters of Velázquez's painting. Velázquez, King Felipe IV and his Queen Mariana de Austria, the Infanta Margarita María de Austria, Doña María Agustina Sarmiento, Menina of the Queen, Doña Isabelle de Velasco, daughter of the Count of Fuensalida, the dwarf Nicolasico Bertusato, and the dog, the dwarf Mari Bárbola, Doña Marcela de Ulloa, Señora de Honor, Lady in Waiting, next to the guardadamas, Gentleman Usha, and the Queen's Chamberlain, Don José Nieto Velázquez. The two copies of Rubens made by Velázquez's son-in-law seem to be of no interest to Picasso, and therefore he gives them the same value as a window. The hooks, however, are of importance, and therefore included. Picasso's painting is slightly smaller than the original by Velázquez, and he chooses a landscape format instead of Velázquez's portrait format. For Picasso, the main character is Velázquez. He turns him into a giant, painting frantically with a palette in each hand. His face has turned into a double profile, as if he is looking intensely at himself. The hooks in the palace ceiling have been enlarged to resemble the hooks used to hang jamones to dry, salty ham. It is ironic that the paintings by Rubens, copied by Del Mazo in the background, unlike the metal hooks, have been wiped clean. Similarly, the couple formed by Doña Marcela de Ulloa and the Gentleman Usha are of no importance to Picasso, and he draws them against the wall as a compositional device. By contrast, the image of Isabel de Velasco is very bizarre. She reminds me of Doña Urraca, a nasty character from a Spanish comic book created around 1948 and very popular in Spain. The dwarf Mari Bárbola he has drawn with the shape of a tumbler toy. There seems to be a joyful and comic element in both characters. On the other hand, Nicolasico and the dog have not yet been defined. They are drawn almost as ghosts. The reflected images of Philip IV and his Queen Mariana of Austria in Picasso's painting have become a grotesque hook and some blotted marks. A similar hook appears on the face of the princess. Maybe Picasso was comparing the characters of the Spanish monarchy to legs of salty ham. The figure of José Nieto Velázquez, the Queen's Chamberlain, he paints black and very central, giving it an intimidating presence. In Velázquez's painting, he has his cloak to the right. Picasso moves it to the left, and by doing so, he creates a strong diagonal across the painting, accentuating Velázquez's same composition. Next to the easel, the Menina Maria Agustina Sarmiento serves the Infanta as his new companion serves him. She is the only character with clear features, and they resemble those of Jacqueline Roch. A Menina is a Portuguese name given to a lady-in-waiting. Her function is to serve royalty. Given the extra disproportionate size in which Picasso paints Velázquez compared to the monarchs, we could assume that his Meninas are not there to serve the Infanta. After all, he had already made it clear to Cervantes that he would make them his, and his Meninas serve other purposes. To the observations of Palau y Fabra regarding Ángeles and Olga, I would add that in the series of paintings that followed the large monochromatic piece, Picasso is vivisecting his entire emotional life. The royal family depicted by Velázquez offered Picasso a relevant and useful scenario from which to proceed. The Menina's character could easily represent all the women of his life. The women of Picasso's past continued to be important to him in 1957. He treasured portraits he had made of Fernande and Eva, the lovers from his studios in Montmartre, dating back from his blue, pink and cubist periods. He also kept particular works inspired by Marie-Thérèse or Dora, the women that followed Olga, as well as intimate bronzes of pregnant Françoise. After Gillot left him, their children visited La Californie regularly, as we can see in these personal photographs taken by the American photographer Duncan Douglas. Paloma and Claude cohabited happily with dogs, pigeons, goats, and owls, and they all entered his paintings with the same ease that they ran around his studio. Marie-Thérèse was alive too in Maya, his oldest daughter. Maya remained close to her father long after Marie-Thérèse had vanished from his life. The unorthodox and chaotic life led by the artist was perhaps looking for order inside Velázquez's studio. Reconstructing it in his own terms was a means of overcoming his bereavement, confronting his needs, and facing up to the fear of old age. In order to study the paintings that followed his first canvas more easily, I have ordered them by subject matter under 4 headings: the characters 1, 2, 3, and 4, the interiors, the pigeons, and the landscapes. It is very important to remember that they were not done in such a sequence, as he shifted between one subject and another. Except for number 24, every single canvas appears to have been done in one single day, and there were gaps of time when no paintings were made. The total number of actual working days amounts to 30. Roughly speaking, he started with the Infanta, and then produced the group of the pigeons, followed by some interiors that he alternated with Maria Agustina Sarmiento, Isabelle de Velasco, and the dwarfs. The 3 landscapes were then made, and the portrait of Jacqueline and 1 small canvas of Isabelle de Velasco concluded the series. The pianist is a one-off, painted in the middle of the series. In the characters 1, we find 14 studies of the Infanta, which I have placed chronologically by date. There is no color in the first 3 canvases. They were done in the same monochromatic scheme as the main painting. Then, slowly, he added primary colors at the same time as constantly redrawing the face. He visited analytical cubism with the freedom that 50 years of image making had given him. He knows what he wants to say, and he says it. The images contain every formal device that any painter could ever dream of mastering, yet the image is absent and vacant. Here the Infanta becomes solid again. She is fixed between the red and the blue. She could be a cloth doll or a fetish. Her hair resembles feathers, the same feathers that carpeted Picasso's studio dropped by the innumerable pigeons that would fly in and out of his window. In this one, the Infanta has a clear double portrait. There are two women in the princess. The lost Galician princess, maybe, and the Russian one who was no longer alive. In the next image, the Infanta's face has the shape of both the moon and the sun, maybe inspired by the way he drew Barbola in his main piece. The colors seem to be fading back to monochrome, and there is no background. In number 16, Isabelle de Velasco and the Infanta are superimposed, as if they were the same woman. Ángeles, Fernande, Eva, Olga, Marie-Thérèse, the image could portray all of them. Yet, if we were to retouch the mouth of the Infanta, it could easily read as a moustache, turning the image into a musketeer representing Velázquez or himself. And it could also be an allusion to the Mona Lisa of Marcel Duchamp, dating from 1919. The last portrait of the Infanta is to me the most enigmatic portrait of the princess. The woman of the many faces could be a reborn Damoiselle d'Avignon, the painting through which he created a device that magnified the possibilities of image making in two-dimensional space. The image is staring at the viewer. She is mysterious but unobtainable. The 9 canvases of the pigeon theme were done between the 6th and the 12th of September, and in between 2 of the paintings of the Infanta, this one and this one. The sizes vary from a small one, 33 by 24 centimeters, to a large one, 145 by 113 centimeters. Except for one, all the canvases are in the portrait format. The island of Sainte Marguerite can be seen through the window. Palm and eucalyptus trees appear behind the black metal railings of the balcony. Their greens merge poetically with the calm, clean blue sea. Each canvas portrays a different time of the day, as the birds either stand on the cold metal of the railings or are looking for the shade in the interior. The way the island is positioned in relation to the horizon line reveals the different viewpoints from where it was painted. Number 24 is the only canvas with 2 dates on it, 12th and 14th of September. Unlike the other 8, it needed longer to complete, and in my view, it could be read as if it was a tile full of arabesques taken from the Cármenes of Al-Andalus, the lovely patios commonly found in his native Andalusia. He is inside, watching the journey of the birds that come and go freely. His passion for the winged creatures has not changed from the days when his father was guiding him towards the kingdom of image making. He knows them well, and he responds to what he sees very much in tune with their fragility. I remember very well the first time I saw these pigeons in Barcelona. They were hanging on the walls of the 13th century Gothic-style palace where the Picasso Museum is housed. I sense a familiar melancholy in them. It was no doubt a view of the French sea, a seascape seen from a window packed full of well-fed pigeons. They stood alone between him and the spectacular sea, a familiar sea indeed. Yet it was not the Spanish Mediterranean where he was born, the homeland he was exiled from and that he would never see again. The pigeon series could be an intermezzo between Meninas, Infantas and dwarfs, a memento maybe of the things that truly mattered. Before we try to respond further to Picasso's interiors, let us briefly return to Velázquez's canvas, as it may offer us clues on how to probe Picasso's Meninas. Back in the mid-17th century, when the canvas of the Meninas was painted, it was regarded as a portrait of the royal family and titled as such. The name of Las Meninas did not appear until 1843. According to Javier Portús, head of the Department of Spanish Baroque Painting at the Prado Museum, the Meninas canvas was kept for a long time in the private apartments of the Alcázar, where access was restricted. But it did not take long for the painting to begin to pose serious questions in the minds of painters and writers. What Velázquez wanted to say with his large canvas, we will never know, and perhaps with the same applies to Picasso's version. Whether or not it is important to know what went through the minds of the two artists when they executed the canvases remains an issue. The paintings are still ready to ignite many more questions as the years go by. The journey of the painter unfolds parallel to the times and events that take place during his or her life. The Meninas were painted at a time when artists, though highly respected, were regarded as artisans. We know that Velázquez tried fiercely to obtain the Order of St. James, a title that would turn him into a nobleman. American art historian Jonathan Brown argues that the Meninas was not only an abstract vindication of the nobility of painting, but also a way to assert the personal nobility of Velázquez and his work. For the artist, painting has never been just a tool in the hands of the artisan to copy nature. It has always been an expression of profound human emotion that can achieve much greater goals. By becoming a knight, his work too gained a higher standing, moving painting from the rank of a craft to the status of philosophy and literature. Velázquez took the license to change court protocol by bringing the royal children to his studio. The placing of the figure of the Queen's Chamberlain is also puzzling. Don José is either leaving or entering the studio alone, instead of keeping close to the royal family, fulfilling his task of escorting them, opening and closing the palace doors as they walked along. We do not know if it was Las Meninas that won him the elevation to knighthood, but it was not until 3 years after the canvas was completed that Diego Velázquez was given the Order of Santiago. What's more, according to Antonio Palomino, the first known biographer of Velázquez, the Cross of St. James was not painted on Velázquez's chest until 1661, the year after his death. The interiors of Picasso present an equal number of questions. They are composed of 5 canvases without the figure of Velázquez and 5 with. The first and second are small canvases, 35 by 27 and 46 by 37 centimeters, both done on the 4th of August. The way that the paint is applied suggests they were probably done very quickly. In the first we cannot see Velázquez. In the second, as the viewpoint is further back, we get a wider view of the interior. He paints Velázquez in blue, the same color as the window where the light comes from. Green, yellow and red are used to portray the Infanta and her entourage. They are kept in a bundle in the foreground, while the background is in twilight. He had told us before that having slightly moved the figure would force him to modify the light in the picture, or even to change it completely. He most certainly does that. Using primary colors, he replaces the illusion of natural light by the use of strong color contrast on black. He seems to be turning the lights on and off, while moving the characters backwards and forwards as if they were puppets from a pantomime. From the 15th to the 19th of September, he produces 4 large canvases exactly the same size, measuring 129 by 161 centimeters. In this one, painted extremely thinly, using lots of turpentine, we see a very large and imageless mirror crowning the head of Doña María Agustina Sarmiento. What does it mean? In this one, the characters are more obvious, but the mirror is still important, this time turned into a spider web, a diamond, or even a window. The third is a jigsaw puzzle, in which he merges the animate and the inanimate. He creates space using primary and secondary colors, and in the process freezes time. Red and black prevail here, creating a strong tension between the flatness of the images and the three diagonals that imply perspective. The mirror is now a flat red square, and the hooks are back. In my view, Las Meninas painting is about space above anything else. 3 centuries later, Picasso enters Velasco's interior with the knowledge of 300 years of the history of painting. He flattens the space and gives his own narrative to the images. The final result is not a copy or an interpretation, but a new and compelling statement. Between the 2nd and the 3rd of October, 2 more canvases exactly the same size as the 4 mentioned before are completed. The first looks like a labyrinth. It reminds us of the spiral structure of the board game known as the Great Game of the Goose. Pure colors sing together reminiscent of the Fauves. Nicolasico and the dog are placed at the bottom right-hand corner, ready to start the game. In the next one, the browns, greys and blacks from the original have returned, and this time the mirror is showing a geometric shape crowning a pyramidal Velázquez wearing in his chest a well-defined cross of Santiago. The Prado Museum used to sell mirrors so that visitors could observe the reflection of Velázquez's painting. Perhaps if we were to reflect Picasso's interiors on a mirror, we might find a mass of lines and pure colors projected to infinity. On the 15th and 17th of November, he executes a large canvas, that is 130 by 96, alongside a very small one, 35 by 27 centimeters. Yet, the 2 compositions work in the same way, relying on a uniform red background which is almost completely flat. This red background will return again the following day in the image of Doña María Agustina Sarmiento, as we will see. This painting of the pianist was done on the 17th of October. That day, no other painting was recorded. There was a gap of 7 days before and after the pianist when no paintings were done. It was executed in between this one, portraying María Agustina Sarmiento, and this one of Nicolasico Pertusato. It is a large canvas measuring 130 by 96 centimeters. Who is this pianist? Could it be the one playing Fauré back in Rome? His red costume and the stretched leg over the dog present him as Nicolasico Pertusato. However, the magic of painting is that it could be all of those, or none, and all sorts of other things as well. What we do know for sure is that there is no piano in Velázquez's painting, so this pianist belongs only to Picasso. The second group contains 8 studies of Isabelle de Velasco. It is hard to deny the obvious connection between Isabelle de Velasco and Olga Koklova, the aspiring minor aristocrat that he loved as a wife. We see no salmon pink or silver here, but the image has the grace of a stage lady. The greens, reds and yellows combine beautifully and are reminiscent of delicate butterflies. In 2 of them we see the Queen's Chamberlain standing in the doorway, although he draws him as a stickman, perhaps symbolizing the male. The Infanta here is a yellow shadow. Like a fading footstep of someone no longer there. And in this one, we see Mari Barbola standing next to Doña Isabel. The lady dwarf is dressed in blue, and her face could be an African mask. There is something religious about her, accentuated by this particular choice of blue. Picasso's royal dwarfs and those painted 3 centuries earlier by Velázquez share the same dignity. They were victims of the 17th century society, a time when the ranks in social hierarchy could not be altered. Picasso paints the 2 women as equals, bowing gracefully to an audience that could be applauding their stage performance. Let's remember that Olga's death was still recent. Only 2 years had gone by since her burial. Picasso might have wanted to immortalize the ballerina he had passionately loved next to all the women that had shared his life. The image on the screen is the last portrait of Doña Isabel, and it is also the last painting he did, closing with it the Meninas series. We will now look at the 4 canvases where the dwarfs and the dog are portrayed. He starts with a small canvas measuring 61 by 50 centimeters, and then 3 large ones of 130 by 96 centimeters. The images are all painted in the same way. There is no difference between the deformed servant slaves, the Meninas, or the royals. Nicolasico could be a royal, dressed in red, with lovely blonde hair, and placed in a clear background like the one where the Infanta was placed earlier. Here we see him again as a ghost, whispering something to Isabelle de Velasco, and once more the theory of Palau y Fabra becomes relevant. Picasso gives many roles to the young male. He can be mischievous and kick the dog, he can be creative by playing the piano, or he can whisper words of encouragement to Olga Koklova during the rehearsals. The hunting dog of the Alcázar that Velázquez had painted tame and drowsy is replaced by Picasso with his own lively dog called Lump, a present given to him by the photographer Duncan Douglas. Picasso had a menagerie of adopted animals that wandered freely around his studio. Here Mari Barbola is again portrayed in blue, wearing what I see as an African mask, and Nicolasico is dressed in a red devil's costume. In this last one, the mask has gone, and the scene could be read as a homely interior with children and a dog. From the 17th of November to the 2nd of December, when these 3 landscapes were done, no other images were recorded. These small landscapes read to me more like sketches than finished works. The heat of the summer has gone. It would soon be winter, and the trees would lose their glamour. Like snapshots from a camera, the 3 landscapes record the passing seasons. We will conclude with the 8 studies of the Menina María Agustina Sarmiento, probably representing Jacqueline, the beautiful pottery seller who became Picasso's second wife 4 years after the Meninas were painted. The first canvas dates from the 20th of August, which is very much the beginning of the series. We see a woman holding a tray on her fingertips. Her features resemble Jacqueline's. In the 2 canvases that follow, we see Doña María Agustina with the Infanta. Let's remember that in the sketch done in the Prado 63 years earlier, Picasso portrayed only these 2 women. And if he saw his first love in the Infanta, we could assume that María Agustina could very well represent his last one. In both paintings, the mirror where the monarchs are reflected is included. In the first there is a flowery pattern reflected on it, and the Menina could again be a cartoon of a tumbler toy. In the second, the mirror is a black rectangle. As Velázquez had done before him, Picasso takes good care in drawing the hands of the future dame. What are these hands saying? Your guess is as good as mine. The lady holds a tray offering water to the Infanta. She seems discreet, gentle, feminine and obedient. Yet, when we take a closer look, we start to see dualities in the image. Perhaps she is not so submissive after all. Her massive left hand has an aggressive gesture, and her entire figure has an austerity that contradicts the gentleness of the ladies in waiting. Picasso's Meninas no longer have anything to do with the Spanish court or Velázquez. By now, they are his women. In this canvas, the image has turned into a harlequin, an image that portrays him better than any other, and that can be found in his work throughout his career. These are a few examples from the many he did. The vivisection of the princess and her mates seems to inevitably have given life to the jester, the buffoon, the able survivor that once again emerged from the aftermath. The painting is a very small canvas, less than 25 centimeters tall, and the character of the Commedia dell'arte is presented in a humble pose, imitating a subservient Menina. The painting is a very small canvas, less than 25 centimeters tall, and the character of the Commedia dell'arte is presented in a humble pose, imitating the subservient Menina. A more compassionate harlequin, perhaps. A white square gives space to the single-colored interior. He delicately stands in a powerful red background, a color scheme that reminds us of Matisse, the old friend he had lost not long ago. This portrait of Jacqueline was done the day after he painted the landscapes, a large image by comparison measuring 116 by 89 centimeters. The trompe-l'œil, or trick of the eye, a technique to create optical illusions, is used here to create a frame. Palau y Fabra claims that Picasso is taking Velázquez's enigmatic mirror away from the interior to frame Jacqueline's reflection instead of the monarch's. An intelligent remark, as the journey around the studio of the Master of Seville is almost over. There is only one painting left to do, and Picasso has already found his own image for the enigmatic mirror, the woman that will be his faithful Menina for 20 years. As Sabatés remarks, Any nou, vida nova, a Catalan saying meaning new year, new life. The series has finished. The painted princess, the maids and the dwarfs are left upstairs with the pigeons, the landscapes and the seascapes. Picasso returns to the ground floor to enter another reality, where a real woman awaits him.